Manela, UTB, and Onyedika. Thank you guys for coming in. All right, thank you. So yeah, we have Roger again, and we're also going to have Roger on the after today. We're going to have Roger again on the 30th of July. So thank you. If you have questions, like usual, please leave a comment or raise your hand. Okay. So thank you for coming in, Roger. Thank you once again for doing this with us. Thank you.
Sure
So,
thing.
just like we've been talking about, right, trying to understand product management and all of that. Now, there is this conception, there's still a misconception around products and what product roadmap is. I think I saw a couple of tweets about it today on Twitter as well. So now, for context, I feel like people have different ideas of what a product roadmap is, what a product roadmap should be and should not be. So, for more context, could you please give us some sort of an highlight of what a product roadmap is?
Great. I'm just trying to find an article. So in typical Roger's
Did you get that?
format, yeah, I did. In typical Roger fashion, I have an article on most of these. So here is an article that I wrote on explaining product roadmaps to a 5-year-old. It's probably going to be a more articulate, phrasing that I'm going to get, and I'm going to get you in a short list. But basically, a product roadmap. Firstly, I think what most people miss when they start doing a product roadmap or try and deliver on a product roadmap is it doesn't operate within a vacuum. It operates within a much larger context, and outside of that context, it's not going to make sense. And so your product roadmap. So there's a guy called Ravi Mehta. I'll find the link for you now quickly. Ravi, there we go. Product strategy stack, and he's got this really great product strategy stack just around looking at like your vision defines your strategy, your business strategy defines your product strategy defines your product roadmaps, and your product roadmap defines your goals and your metrics, or what you measure towards that, and you kind of plan them down and you measure them up. So you forward looking you go down, and backwards looking you measure up. Like, are we delivering our goals means are we hitting our roadmap, and if we're hitting our roadmap we should hit our product strategy. If we should hit our product strategy, we should hit the company strategy and upwards. So for me, the most important thing is the product strategy is really just the here's the link to the product strategy is a product roadmap is really just what you are delivering, what you plan on delivering, and the order in which you plan on delivering it to fulfill on your product strategy. Your product strategy is the things you are going to ship and the priorities you're going to have in order to deliver on the business strategy. And the business strategy is your plan on how you're going to achieve your mission and your vision. And so when you're trying to create a product roadmap, you have to start within that context. You have to be clear on what the company strategy is. And there's a great example of this. If you look at the comparison of Slack versus Discord. Fundamentally, the products on paper, on the checklist items, are identical. They're both chat apps. They have channels. They have private groups. They have like a one-on-one messaging. They have emoji responses. They have video calling. But the products are fundamentally different in their feel, in their look, and like what they prioritize and how they integrate. And all of that comes down to because they have a different business strategy, or they have a different vision, actually. So Slack is trying to be the way teams communicate, and Discord is helping you connect with your friends around things you love, around experiences you love. So it's around streaming videos and games, and it's much more fun and chatty because their business strategy is different. That means their product strategy is going to be different. Their roadmaps will have the same things on it, but they're delivered in fundamentally different ways. And so it's not a product roadmap isn't just a list of features you're going to ship. A product roadmap is how you are executing on the product strategy.
Right. Makes sense. Thank you. Okay, I think I like that. For clarity's sake, a product roadmap is how did you put that again? Executing a product strategy, correct?
Yeah, so the product roadmap is what you're going to deliver in order to execute the product strategy. And the product strategy is your priorities to deliver against the business strategy. And the business strategy is how you plan on fulfilling the vision and the mission. So if you want
Right.
to
Thank
define
you
a
very
product
much.
strategy, you start with the vision, mission, the company strategy, identify your product strategy, and then what you need to build or ship in order to fulfill on that becomes a lot easier. If you try and create a product roadmap out of thin air, it becomes really difficult.
Difficult, right? Right. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. So thank you guys for coming in again. This is welcome to GMS session. So if you have questions, please leave a comment. All right. But then while we do that, or raise your hand. Okay. So while we do that, we're going to read out some questions we have now. Okay. Yeah, Oyinda, go on, please.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll, can you please give a brief explanation on what product strategy really is?
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. So your product strategy is a subset of the business strategy focused around the products and platforms, or the unique mechanisms that need to be in place in order to deliver on that strategy. So typically, if you look at a business strategy, let's maybe just try to think of an example of one we'll all know well enough. So the business strategy of Facebook, let's take that because it's just high level enough. Business strategy of Facebook is to kind of be this place where people get connected, where you can help communities come together to ultimately serve them ads. Like that's what their business strategy is. They'll have some shift in that they want to focus more towards empowering businesses and individuals, and the language there will be very specific, but that's like more or less what they're going to do. In order to get there, you'll have focus areas or inflection points that you need to achieve in order to get there. So in fact, let me maybe just use a different example that I know much better. So Tesla had the vision of their vision was to democratize electric vehicles and make them ubiquitous, make more electric vehicles than needs. The business strategy was to sell an expensive car, a $75,000 sports car, in order to work out how to build a car with big enough margins to cover the R&D cost. Once they got that right, they then built a cheaper car. In fact, they built two cars, the model, the SUV and the other one. And then once they got that right, they'd reached the mass model, like $30,000, $35,000 family sedan. That was like the business strategy. And at the middle layer, it was to build out the factories and the structures in order to manufacture the cars reliably, as well as build out the charging station. So their overarching plan was fancy sports car, expand down to mid-range cars, building out a charging network and factory processes, and then use those efficiencies to ultimately ship a mass market car at a more configurable. Like that was their overarching business strategy. Now, at each of those inflection points, the product strategy is going to be very different. The product strategy when you're in phase one is what do we need to deliver in order to build a high-performance sports car at any kind of meaningful volume. Firstly, what does that volume look like? What do we need to do? There's a bunch of focus areas, which markets, which are we going to be at the US market or China market? Like all of those decisions will go into a product strategy of build a convertible sports car for the American market at around the 75,000. That'll kind of be a product strategy. Will be focused on that sort of larger business strategy. It focuses on the first phase. This is what we'll need to ship. And then around the product strategy will be building basic processes and infrastructure and getting that going. Once you've got that running, you then shift the product strategy into the second inflection point. And there it's more around efficiencies of scale, creating processes and documenting reliable processes and repeatable processes, squeezing suppliers and finding more reliable suppliers at better pricing. It's around creating a blueprint for the factories that is easily replicable, around the charging stations of working out how to do charging. So like all of those will be facets of the product strategy and like what you need to actually deliver in order to get there. And then that product strategy with a focus area will be the roadmap of the things you are going to ship and the order in which you're going to ship them. Like we're going to ship this first, then we ship that, then we ship that. A roadmap may have dates or a timeline to it, or it may just be a set of priorities that we're going to keep solving this problem until we get it right. Once we've got it right, we're going to move on to that part. And so that's typically what the product strategy is, a layer below the business strategy, which is much more focused around the prioritization of the things you're going to build and the order of the things in which you're going to build them. And then the roadmap becomes those actual deliverables and specs and definitive releases and that sort of thing that you tie to it. Anya, does that answer your question?
Yes, yes, sure. I got a bit more clarity than before. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Roger. So thank you guys for coming in again. If you have questions, please leave a comment or signify. Okay. Now speaking of which, right, I want to ask my question, Roger. Now, how do you know when to retire a product, right? First of all, I think I have two questions. Why do products die out easily? Because sometime in Nigeria here, you probably will know the product. It only spanned for 1 year, 9 months and phased out. Now, a couple of factors happened, I know, but then why does that happen really? And how do you know when to retire a product from the market?
Cool. So a product should only exist when it's contributing towards the product strategy and indirectly the business strategy. When it no longer makes sense, when that product is no longer delivering what it needs to deliver to the business strategy, you should kill it. So I don't know exactly which product you have in mind, but it would normally be tied to the margins weren't large enough and the operating costs, that we were making too much of a loss on it, we should kill the product. Or we're like, all of a sudden we were first to market, now there's a bunch of competitors, they've squeezed down on pricing, the margins are getting too tight, the expectation from the customers are getting too high. We built it first, so we had this weird uniqueness that we actually can't compete in the same way. We should just kill it and focus on other areas of the business. Absolutely. Like, there's plenty of reasons to kill it. The product shouldn't stay alive just because it's alive. That's very much a sunk cost fallacy. It should only be there and should only keep focusing on it when it's continually adding value to the business and ultimately the business strategy.
Okay. So well then, I think the issue as regards retiring a product from the market also largely has to do with the founders now. All right, because here in Nigeria that rarely happens, except in a very dire and severe cases where they no longer have a runway or enough runway to go. That is when a product is phased out. But yeah, we try to
It's a great time to phase it out. You shouldn't be paying money if a product is unsustainable and there is no path to it becoming sustainable. The sooner you kill it, the better. You're just going to lose more money.
Right.
Like, rather kill it, right? It doesn't make sense to keep running a dead product. So a lot of people will use, like a lot of the fintechs, the neobanks, are using like lending or mobile money to get in, but actually they're trying to become a bank, a fully featured bank with bank accounts and payments and those sort of things. So they might build a product to build the team and the brand and the momentum, and then launch the other products and eventually kill off the first product because they use it as a stepping stone to get to where they want to get to. Totally legitimate strategy. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. If that doesn't make sense and that's not ultimately what you want to be in business for, you might run a product that's adjacent to where you want to be in order to build a brand and momentum and a team in a slightly less regulated area, because the banking licenses take really long, and to raise the funding to get the banking licenses, you need to have something in the market. So you build something adjacent, like PiggyVest, Money Point, like so many of the companies have done this, and then they're kind of shifting towards being full-fledged banks because that's ultimately where the holding of the assets and where the real revenue in fintech is. If you're not purely in payment, so it makes total sense.
Yeah, it makes sense, of course. Largely. Okay, thank you very much. So someone is asking this question: are PMs meant to give cost estimation for building a product?
I mean, it depends on the context. Like often in product interviews, it helps to give that. So then the expectation from the company is that you can at least think about that. Most of the time, if you're running in a company and everyone's employees, it's more about just what is the time, so that you're not like you're selling internal developer time, but ultimately yes, every product, like if you're, maybe not if you're a more junior product manager, but if you're a more senior product manager and you're proposing a new feature, everything's a trade-off. What is the cost versus revenue of this feature or that feature? So if we build credit for merchants, or if we build a savings product for consumers, what is the licensing? What is the cost? What is the complexity? What is the support costs? What are the customer operation costs? And maybe it's not exact numbers, but as long as you've got a baseline to compare the two, to know that, hey, this one's going to cost us 3 times more, but we'll make 5 times the profit, versus this one that'll be cheaper to do. So then it's a question of, well, do we have the cash flow up front, or the cash in hand up front to spend that much to make more? And if we don't, we should probably build this first until we've got enough profit, and then we launch that product. So it might not be you always choose the cheaper product or the more cost-effective product. It might just be the one is going to have too much of a baseline. But being able to think about, in business terms, what does this choice over that choice make? Like, how does pricing, like, so I mean, I spend a lot of my time working out unit economics and COGS across our entire tech stack, to like work out, well, what is our gross margin on pricing? Like, I'm the one that drives that in our team. So I do the COGS, the cost of goods sold, which is like your underlying input costs of all the servers and the machine learning and like messages and SMSs and notifications, everything. The biz team does the sales costs and sales pricing of what they think they can sell in the market and the discounting room they have. And the finance person is responsible for the balance between the two, which is your gross margin. So I spend a lot of time dealing with costs and working out, if we scale to, so we do digital address verification, if we scale to 2 million address verifications a month, what is our cost per address verification going to be? When we scale to 50 million a month, what is that cost going to be? What is our pricing going to be as we reach that scale? How much can we discount? If somebody's going to bring 1 million addresses per verification per month, how much discount can we give them? Because having more will lower our costs with volume-based discounts. Like, we're doing those conversations all the time. So absolutely, probably not as a junior, but definitely as a more senior product manager, you should be able to think about in cost terms.
I agree. I think for senior product managers, they get to make decisions based on cost estimation and resource allocation and all of that. But I also used to think, what do you think about empowered? Okay. Let's. So I'm trying to talk about this same cost cost estimation, right? What do you think about empowered product managers doing that? And how long do you need to be a product manager for before you are empowered to build a product and then estimate cost for building a product now?
Cool. So an empowered product manager is something slightly different. I'll get to that now. But even if you don't think about cost in terms of dollars, you can think about cost in terms of time. Like, how many developer hours or how many days or weeks or sprint cycles is it going to cost us to build this feature versus that feature? And if we ship it, what is the revenue impact going to have on the business, and do a rough balance between those in order to make your decisions. I think there's like the best definition of what is product that I've ever come across is that it's the balance. It's identifying how to add value to customers while generating revenue for the business and understanding the technical constraints. So you have these 3 circles of customer needs, business strategy or business objectives, and technical constraints, or sort of like what the technical team or what you have. And so a product manager is constantly moving between those 3. But the strategic decision making is balancing the value to the customer versus, like, and we talk about when you create value and when you capture value. So how do you actually make money for the business? Balancing, you shouldn't just build what customers want. You should build stuff what customers want in line with a way that makes money for the business without incurring massive amounts of technical debt or incurring a lot of cost on the technical side. So the more assets you can leverage, the less you need to build, the tighter the balance between the benefit and the revenue can be. But it's always the dynamic balance between those 3. going back to your point around empowered product teams. So empowered product teams is something very specific around the team structure beyond just the product manager. So that's looking at when you're working in fully cross-functional teams. So the product manager is working alongside developers and designers, where that entire team, and maybe a data scientist in there depending on the company, but that entire team does the entire product from idea through to shipping. So the developers are interviewing customers, the designers and developers and PMs are all interviewing customers, unpacking insights, writing the scopes together. They have different aspects of it and they have different ways to contribute, but the developers aren't off writing code and the PMs just doing scopes. In an empowered product team, the developers are gathering insights and feeding into the design of the scope as much as they are shipping. And when they're shipping, the PM is working alongside them and taking what they've got and testing it and iterating and coordinating and working alongside the developers as they ship. So that team is fully empowered to take a product or a feature end to end through the entire journey. It's not separate teams that do different parts of work and sort of throw the work over the fence to the next team. So you do scoping, then design, then build, then things. And so any team that has like a team of developers, a team of designers, and a team of product managers that are trying to scurry between the two is not an empowered product team. An empowered product team sits together and the entire team works on the same thing at the same time. And so it's like empowered product team versus feature teams is typically how you look at that. Marty Kagan has done a lot of writing around the balance of those things, but that's something quite different. It's more on a company structure than it is anything a PM can do individually.
All right, thank you very much. Before now, I'm not sure I thought of it that way, or so as a matter of fact, it's why I asked really. So I didn't before now I didn't know it was empowered teams they are cross-functional. I think they are that part. They're that part of the product management that talks about cross-functional really well. Where other teams, where the development team works hand in hand with the product managers. I used to think they all sit and the product manager makes all the decisions and stuff, then bring them on board, then they ideate and refine and work on it. Now, before now, that was actually how I saw it. But then, thank you for that. Thank you so much, sir. So, thank you guys for coming in again. Welcome to GMS session. If you have questions, all right, regarding anything in product management, clarity, please raise your hand, okay, or leave a question in the comments. We're going to attend to that. And please do well to try to read up on the links Roger leaves here, okay? They are really helpful. And if you want to talk about the challenges in your workplace as well as a product person, please, you can also signify, okay? So, yeah, I think I have, again, so how often do you refine a product roadmap? We talked about that in the beginning of this session, So how often do you refine a product roadmap? Do you do it quarterly or biannually or yearly? How does that work? Right? And when you do refine a product roadmap now, what additions do you do to it and what do you take out?
Okay, the easiest way for me to do this is to actually just show you. So I'll show you what I do. Cool. This is semi-proprietary, don't share this too widely, but the easiest way to explain it is to just explain my process. Look, this is just my process as well. It's not the process. I don't believe in a single way to do anything.
Okay.
But let me just get here, sorry, sharing this one. So what I do is I've got a larger product strategy. It's just loading. Come on. Okay. I've got a larger product strategy that I've put together. Sorry, we're going a little slowly. Wake up. All right. So this is the strategy 23 to 25. I review this one. I actually need to do it now, but I probably review it every 12 months. In fact, it's quite a bit has changed recently with the CBN.
Okay.
So we're looking at making this change. So this is kind of, I start on what the focus is, what our core strategy is. We go down to the importance of network effects and the order in which we're going to focus on that. These are our products. And then these are the principles that, like, the user plus the address is our single source of truth. We need to make it simple and what that actually means. We're on the same side of the user, so we always make decisions in line with the end user, not with companies. And then ultimately what we need to shift to is secondary, and then metrics and milestones. And then I've got a high level business and product timeline of just more or less what we think we're going to be shipping when, as a rough idea. And then each quarter I do a quarterly review. So this was last quarter's review. When it loads. Yeah. So I do a quick review of, like, it was a rough quarter with a CBN. These are the product OKRs. These are the things that we implemented this quarter. This is what we achieved. And then these were some issues accounted. So each quarter I've got like a little write-up on what we did. And then I refine the products. So this is the previous quarter before that, the things we shipped, the achievements we've done, sort of metrics and measures, issues we encountered, and some stuff like learnings we've got. And then ultimately that bleeds into what my next plan is for the next quarter. So then I do a quick write-up. So this was going into Q2. This is the overview. This is the scope. These are the areas. So getting infrastructure live. So we did a massive re-architecture, increasing revenue, and a bunch of things we're doing to focus on that, improving the customer experience, and a bunch of sort of focus areas underneath that. And then location fingerprinting R&D was the lowest priority. We ended up not getting to that at all. And then kind of our OKRs and where we get to. So this is like each quarter I do a bit of an update, but this plan is really like this quarter's execution of my larger product strategy, of my long-running product strategy. And then I've got quarterly plans of what that looks like for each of those. So this is a company strategy, once again, tying it back to company strategy, product strategy, and constantly reiterating how those bleed into each other, and then what that looks like, whether CVM does approve or doesn't approve digital verification, which for us is like a light switch. And so there we're kind of looking at OKRs and then implementation priorities. This was a slightly different way I started trying to blend OKRs with talking about like an empowered product teams. So that's kind of like, so I have the overarching strategy, and then I do a quarterly review and a short quarterly plan each quarter. Is how I do the planning. The roadmaps we then run in linear, which is sort of larger running. We have initiatives, which is our quarterly objectives. So we'll have 2 or 3 OKRs, or strategic objectives for the quarter, and then under that we have a set of projects. In fact, happy to share that. If this is interesting, let me know. If this is not interesting, I can totally.
Yeah, no, it is very well. Thank you very much.
Often you don't see like the inner workings of companies. So we've literally recently shifted away from like these teams, which was all like linked to our product names, and we've kind of moved to T1, which is the results to customer team. And so that's like everything end user focused. We have the collecting data team, which is like everything around our customers and dashboards and integrations and those sorts of things. And then the infrastructure and processing, which is all the stuff that happens in the background. So those are really my 3 teams across the developers. And then under, so here we have initiatives. So the initiatives are hockey stick growth for faster digital verification, bounce back with physical verification, and reliability and stability. Those are my objectives out of the OKRs. Those are the 3 objectives that the product team is executing on. And then you can see in the projects view, you can see the hockey stick growth is this initiative. And here are all the different projects that are working towards that, each with tasks. So any one of these, you can go into the tasks and see with different milestones that are set for this is we bounce back. And so I've got the quarterly plan or the monthly view of which projects we're actively working on as we go through that. So that's how we treat it. Like I said, it's less about don't try to recreate this, but the principle, what I'm trying to do this quarter is align more of our planning and tools around the company OKRs and objectives, instead of just having it project and feature based. So previously we would just have the projects and like these are the projects we're going to ship, but we're becoming more like a feature factory. And so in the effort to try and shift us towards an empowered product team, I'm trying to work more that on our developer roadmaps, we have the company objectives, and then the developers can see what they're doing and which teams are contributing towards which company objectives. And so in doing that, I'm trying to align them together towards an objective instead of grouping them around shipping features. That makes
Okay.
sense.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. So well, this is how I do mine, right? I don't. So that goes to show that you review your product roadmap quarterly, correct?
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. So what I do is from my roadmap,
if
I
not more
call.
than that.
Okay. Okay. Oh, you do that more often, right? Makes sense. So what I do is I call from the roadmap, right, and develop quarterly goals. I call that quarterly goals now instead of refining roadmap, right? Because what I do is I sort of add to the roadmaps instead of enhancing. I don't know, more like I don't know if you groom roadmaps, that doesn't work, correct? So
Yeah.
I sort of do uh I call them quarterly goals, call it from the roadmap, then we work on that for 3 months, which is a quarter, right? Does that really work? Is that a good approach to take?
Yeah, I mean, so we're a lot more fluid in that by design. So every sprint, I've got it's me and the designer and the product manager and the other PM on the team. We sit and we adjust, like, okay, for this next sprint, who's working on what else has come up, what have been, so we're adjusting our roadmap literally every sprint. We're sort of shifting priorities and balancing trade-offs of, hey, what's the benefit of getting this out versus the cost of not fixing this bug that came up? Or like we're making that trade-off. A customer is trying to integrate an Expo right now, and like we don't actually support Expo. So
Yeah.
is it worth us trying to make support for that versus actually turning that customer off and focusing on these other revenue generating things? So we're making cost revenue trade-offs even in like which customers we support, just because of how we move. But so I have a long running strategy with a basic outline of the big milestones that I want to try and hit over the next 18 to 24 months. Then every quarter I'm pulling from that and adjusting that of like what we did ship, what I think we should focus on next. And then every sprint we're adjusting the project basis of what do we actually think we're going to get to in the next 2 weeks? What tasks should we have? Are all the developers sort of working together on capacity, working on things, and we're shuffling around that? So it's very dynamic. So it's not like when we get to the end of a quarter, for the next few sprints, we just continue working on the stuff we have been because we're already shuffling them. It's not like a massive stop and restart. It's very continuous, but we're just checking at intervals.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Roger. Thank you. Thank you. Onyedika, you want to say something? Go on, please.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask, like, following the conversation on roadmaps and all, as it relates to like communicating it to shareholders and timelines, how do you manage timelines? So I saw like on your linear board, they were like, it was like in a swim lane kind of view, and there were timelines. Like, do you set like particular timelines, and do you try to stick with those timelines and probably release whatever is ready within those timelines, or how do you manage? How do you manage that?
Look, so, and that's why I say a lot of this depends on the company and the organization. Like we're a startup, we're a small team. I've pretty much got carte blanche to push back on timelines, and like I set the mandate, and if something's falling back, I communicate it to the head of biz, the country manager, and the CEO, and say, look, shifted this priority, this is the result, and like I have the last say on what gets shipped and what gets built when. But we're a small team, we're pretty dynamic in that. If you're in a large organization, they're probably going to need more fixed timelines and committed releases and that sort of thing. And if you're doing that, then this very fluid way of working probably isn't going to work for you unless you're building in quite a lot more fat. But the one thing I will say is typically you have they say there's always this golden triangle in product, right? You have good, cheap, and fast, and you can pick two. So you can either have it good and cheap, or it can be fast, or it can be good and fast, but not cheap. So it's kind of this balance between the things. And so when you're looking at like if you're in an organization that needs fixed timelines and fixed commitments, then what you need to do is you need to shift scope. So say we will deliver on this date, but it might be, depending on how we get through, it might be the full features of all the bells and whistles, or it might just be this one feature of this aspect that we need to get to. And so if you have variable scope, you can commit to fixed timelines, because as you reach uncertainties and delays happen, as they invariably do, you then are cutting scope instead of buying more time. and then it's a bit of a trade-off between the two. So yeah, that's kind of how I would kind of position it. But yeah, it sort of depends on the organization you're in and what you have to negotiate with. If you do need to pick timelines, you just need to put in enough fat and be able to adjust scope wherever possible.
Okay, thank you. Onyedika, does that answer?
It does. Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, I get that. Makes sense. Thank you. Wow. Well, thank you. Okay, so we have a new question here. We put it out. Welcome, guys, to another group mentorship session. We're almost rounding up. So, but if you have questions, all right, you can use the activity tool. Right. One, you can leave your comments or questions here. Two, and thirdly, you can you can raise your hand, digital hand, then we can call you up, all right, to ask Roger whatever question it is you have. So yeah, we have now. But now this has moved our attention to research. So this person is asking, how do I conduct market research and how do I use SQL for data interpretation? Do you do that? Do you use SQL for data interpretation?
So I don't in my current role. I query Kibana, which is, they have KQL, which is a Kibana query language, something similar. So I know how to use SQL, but I don't actively use it in my day-to-day. I'm not going to answer that question specifically just because I think that's going to, there's plenty of tutorials on how to use SQL or do that. And I'm not going to give it the time or the justice or the preparation to be able to deliver that effectively. But yeah, really, there's just a bunch of if you learn the logic behind how to construct a query, and if you know how your data is structured, once you've got the mental model of those two things, then working out the syntax becomes a lot easier of exactly what phrasing or things to use. So if you're wanting to learn SQL, I would look at it from those two things. Firstly, how do you construct a query? What are the things? And then what is the data and the format of the data you're querying? Because you're often looking down and across and pulling the same row, or look up this field in this table and the matching field in this table, and then merge those two together. And so you're kind of using that kind of language and functionality. But so you need to understand how the data is structured, and you need to understand how the queries work, and how the queries are structured. And once you know that, you can learn the variables and the key phrases and the syntax on how to actually format it correctly. But I would start with those other two if you wanted to learn SQL. If anyone has a great SQL resource that they've used, by all means, drop it in the chat. Let's help each other here. I certainly don't have all the answers. The first question around market research. Market research on what? I don't think there's.
Okay, so I think we can just, because it wasn't so detailed as well, right? It wasn't detailed. So, but I think we can talk about research. Okay, so says, how can I conduct market research? So maybe primary research. But what are your thoughts on primary research? Because I feel primary research.
I would get on to sorry, go ahead.
No, go on.
You feel like primary research?
Yeah, I feel primary research requires some sort of physical action, all right, when trying to conduct, because that would require you to collect data from an actual customers or you've seen and stuff like that now. So that is one way to go about your research. But then your thoughts, please. So because this question is not detailed, so it's tricky to answer that. So I'm asking.
Well, they're both tricky and easy to answer because I can answer it in any direction I like. The short answer would come down to what are the why are you trying to conduct the research? Are you trying to learn what products you should deliver to existing customers in order to get more money out of it? Are you trying to learn who your competitors are and how you stack up to features to them? Are you trying to learn how you are differentiated in the market? Each of those three questions, you might even interview the same people, i.e. you might be interviewing your existing customers, but the way in which you'll deliver it, whether it's a survey or in person, the questions you ask, all of that will massively change depending on the purpose of what you're trying to get out from that decision making. Godwin, I see you've got your hand up. Do you want to add something on there or ask a related question? Feel free to unmute yourself.
Hello, Godwin, are you there?
Yes, sir, I'm here. Good evening.
Good evening.
Hello.
Yeah, good evening. You can go on.
Am I?
Hi.
Yeah, good evening. Go on.
All right. All right. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Please, I want to ask about PRD development.
What do you want to ask about it?
Hello.
Okay.
Okay. Now, most of the times I use a AI tool to do the PRD development, but I want to ask: is there another way before the invention of the AI tools? I want to believe there were other means of developing PRD. Please, I want to. Is there any other way I can be using to develop my PRD for products, please?
Yes. I've dropped a link in the chat of an article that I wrote on PRDs. It was a bit of a rant about long PRDs and people writing overly verbose, useless PRDs. Fundamentally, a PRD is a scope to describe to the developers what needs to get built and why you building what you need to build, the value it's going to generate, and what you're going to measure in order to know what's getting valued. There is no, like, everything else is just different angles or levels on that. There are plenty of formats out there. Yeah, if you just Google PRD examples, there are hundreds out there. I don't think, once again, like, as with most things, there isn't only one way to write a PRD. I think there are many ways to write a PRD. It depends on the type of product. It depends on the type of company. It depends on the culture of the company, and how they're working. The one principle that I will say that I like to bring to any kind of PRD, which is kind of what that article is about, is to have really short, punchy PRDs with lots of addendums, or lots of like a detailed, like, so if you want to do the user research or the other decision making or the feature lists or the designs, or put all of those in attachments to the core PRD, so that the core PRD is never longer than 2 pages. So it's short, it's punchy, it's a summary of all the other information. And what that means is that that's less likely to change. But then as you learn more things, or as you develop things, or as you can add and you can create different versions of all of the addendums, or the attachments, the PRD remains the same. And so developers are never going to read like 30-page documents, especially not ones written by long, verbose AIs, God forbid. They want short, to the point context of what they need to do. And when they're going to get into the design, or when they're going to get into the build, then they'll go into the specific area of the API schemas or the designs or whatever they need to do. But I would try and keep PRDs like no more than 2 pages. And it should be focused around the objective and what the outline and the reasons of what you're building and the measures that you're going to have of what success looks like. It's around sharing the context. And then the details come through in attachments.
Thank you very much, sir. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, thank
Morphean,
you. I have a follow-up question, but someone's hand is up. So, Odusola, can you go on, please? Good evening. Are you there?
Hi, good evening. So this is follow-up on the last question. So PRDs are different from BRDs. So assuming that I work at a startup that is still at the ideation phase, what would you suggest I write first, the PRD or the BRD?
So your product requirements doc is what you need to build. The business requirements doc is what the business needs you to deliver.
build, yeah.
So I would
Exactly.
define, in the same way you define a business strategy and then a product strategy and then a product roadmap, I would define the business objectives and then scope the product in order to deliver on those business objectives. So I would do the business, the
Right.
BRD, and then PRD. You can look, if you're a startup, it doesn't need to be 2 separate documents. You can probably do one document that outlines the business objective, then outlines the product focus, and then goes into the detail of that. It doesn't need to be 2 documents. But yeah, I mean, if you're in a startup, it's probably more lightweight and more fluid, and it's probably your PRD is probably a little bit more of like, we could do either of these things, and we need to have a discussion, and we choose option B over option A and C. And then that becomes the PRD, and the rest moves into stuff that we're explicitly not doing in this build. But you can make documents a little more fluid. The point for me around these requirement documents is they're not something that you write once and that's now cast in stone. It should be something that as you learn more, as you get the feedback from the developers, it's a living document that captures the objectives, the outlines, the scoping, and it keeps evolving with a testing criteria and a record of the delivery of the project. So I generally like to keep them as more living documents. Once again, some cultures like it written in full and like it set in stone and passed up in front. So treat it with care as like what your context is like.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. The link you put out, I saw that. I'm going to read and get back to your questions because you said ditch the bogus or long PRD now, right? I'm trying to understand why. I'm also trying to understand why we require so much or long PRDs in general, because I've written a couple of PRDs, and if they're not detailed the way, if they're not up to 4 pages, it's as though you've not written anything, or there are no requirements to build on, right? So that's now I'm trying to see, because each time I try to tell people to write PRDs, or people I coach to write PRDs and stuff like that, I try to give them specifics now, right? But then it's different when you're developing that PRD for a startup. Then and it goes on to have long list of features, like about 15 to like, how does that work? I'm trying to like, what are the concepts or behind those things? Apologies, but then it baffles me, so I need to ask.
Generally, if you're in a more agile team, you want to be focused on outcomes, not outputs. So you want to be focused on the metrics and measures of how you will measure whether what you've delivered achieves the scope of the intention of this document. If you're working in a factory, or if you're focusing on outputs, you're going to have a massive list of features. And so when you're working in a more empowered team, or a more agile team, or a more fluid environment, you have an objective of this is what we're going to try and achieve, and here's a bunch of experiments that we're going to ship in order to try and achieve that. And whichever one gets us closer is the one we're going to double down on, and we're going to keep working on that until we've achieved this goal. And that is a completely different way of going in a feature factory, which is writing a business requirements document basically by a business analyst, writing this massive document that then moves into design phase, that then moves into build phase, and the developers realize, oh, but this documentation that it was all the API documentation it was based on actually is wildly inaccurate. Now then they need to stop, and it needs to go all the way back to the beginning, and we go working through a waterfall development. So if that's not a living document that you're co-creating the PRD with the teams as you're shipping and learning and iterating and working a step or two ahead of what the developers needed to deliver it, but you're not writing everything up front and setting it in stone. Like if that's how you're building software, it's generally going to suck. But if you're in a big bank, that's probably what you have to do. And a 40 to 60 page PRD is standard. Like, so that's what I say. Like, in general, that's not how I would do it. It's not how I would recommend anyone does it. I don't think that's how you build great products. I don't think that's how you build world-class products, but it absolutely can work to build a product.
Oh, okay. I got to know. So I think organization differs now. All right. Thank you. Godwin, you can go on, please.
All right. Thank you. Please, apologies if I'm asking too much questions. Now, the next question is on finance.
No.
All right. Is on finance. Because when I'm using my AI tool to do the financial aspects of the requirements, what that product will need, it runs into millions. But then, is there a way I can get the real value of what I will need to run the product, please? Because this is one of the challenges I have. Yes, the estimate. When I'm using my AI tools, it runs into millions, whereas we could use even far lesser than that.
Okay.
Yeah, so what you need to remember with an AI tool, like the way AIs work, so GPT is General Transformer Protocol or whatever it is. But what it's really doing is it's looking at, for this question that you've asked, in the context, in all of my learning and in all of the patterns that it's identified, what is the first letter? And then what is the percentage of the next letter? And then what is the percentage of the next or character? and it's making predictions off the next character based off its training data. It has no idea what finance is. It has no financial concepts. It has like none of that in the back. They're starting to build that in, and you're starting to build complex AIs that are built on smaller, very narrow, specific AIs, but general processes. And if you're using the free version of these AIs, it's not the equivalent of getting a finance person to do it. It's literally predicting the percentage of the next character, of what the most likely next character is to complete this. It has no model of the concepts and the work behind it. So my recommendation to you is put it into an Excel spreadsheet and map it out. See, like, what is the input costs? How many hours? What is the rate of that person or that developer? Or how many times I'm going to call this API? And what is the cost every time per 1,000 calls of this API? And work out your modeling off the raw mechanics of what the thing's actually going to do. Like, do your own financials, basically. And it doesn't need to be, I'm talking about like trial balances and like accounting principles. I'm just talking about like the basic mechanics of what's happening in your system. Like put it into Excel spreadsheets, and so you can totally use the AI to ask you which formula you should use, or ask it for like tips and advice, but it doesn't have a mental model of the process or the flow. It's never going to understand that. They're not built like that at all. They never, and in the current, not to say they never will be, but in the current things, that's not what AIs are. It's not what they do. It's not how they're built. So if you're trying to use a hammer to screw in a screw, yeah, it's going to mess it up a bit.
Yeah.
Sure. But
Right.
it has no idea of what a screw is.
Right.
It doesn't know it should turn.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, sir. So I think I have one last concern as regards cost now. But then as regards cost and product development estimation now. Okay, when working with other third-party integrations or systems now, how do you like position? How do you negotiate? Because there was a time my team and I built a blockchain software, and we were trying to negotiate for, we had other third-party applications, right, who would supply our services and APIs now for wallet services and the likes. Because it wasn't part of the budget we had, was not part of our cost. I'm asking you this question because I'm sure you're going to understand, because you work with OK High now, right? And other businesses come to pay for your services or APIs now, sort of. So things like that. How do you position for negotiation properly to get the best deal? Because I can remember vividly, we didn't get the best deal. And if we had gone with that, right, we won't be able to stay competitive in the market now, because customers are not going to buy what we're selling, because it's the cost would go over the roof now. So how do you manage situations like that?
Yeah, I mean, like first I would recommend you go in with the numbers and the data that works for you. Once again, here, let me just show my screen quickly. I'll show you an example of literally what I was working on yesterday.
Okay. Hello, guys.
Sorry about that. Google Meet crashed as I was sharing my screen. You guys got 2 more minutes? Want to see this? Yes or no?
Yeah, sure. Go on, please. Come on, minute.
Let's go on.
Cool. So here's a why is it zoomed in so much? But anyway, it's not letting me zoom out. So like this is my COGS model, my core COGS model. So I have import data that I put in every month. I've got graphs, I've got totals. This is my forecast of costing. So I'm looking at for every volume. So we're doing, so if I'm doing 10,000 verifications per month, my fixed addresses, which is my servers, my salaries and operations, the contribution towards that. For new addresses, we have Google Maps bills, we have notification costs of SMS and WhatsApp. For the verification of machine learning processing, I've got some Lambdas and SQS, SageMaker. The API gateways is Google Kubernetes and Google Compute and that sort of stuff. And so I've got that estimated for each one of these. And so like my notifications even is like a calculation of how many emails, how many SMSs, how many WhatsApps multiplied all out. Like I'm working out a per unit basis of what it costs. And so at 10,000 verifications, it costs me $1 to do a successful verification, which is what SV is. At 100,000, it costs me 20 cents. At a million, it costs me 4 cents. At 10 million, it costs me 1 cent. But I've got a full breakdown of every single, how these things scale. Like, what are my server costs going to be on AWS in order to get that volume? And I've got historical modeling, and I've looked at like numbers that I'm crunching through to do that. And so ultimately I'm putting it like, this is my cost curve graph that I've actually, my unit cost graph of how things get cheaper as we scale. And so as we scale, we can then adjust pricing and get volumes down. So for a big customer, I can see, well, they're going to bring in 100,000 a month or jump me from 100,000 a month to 500,000 a month. I know that my margin is going to increase from 18 US cents down to 6.5 US cents. I can give it to them at half the price because I'm making an extra 10 US cents margin on that volume. So like, that's the kind of number, like there's nothing AI about it. I'm literally just running Google spreadsheets, like running numbers and projections of where that's coming from. But I know very granularly, and if this server cost or these notifications are going to end up being at $10,000, I mean, like my Google Maps alone, Jesus, my forecasting was like, what are Google Maps going to cost us? And it was literally going to cost us like 14,000 at one point. I've done a lot of discounting and some yeah, at one point this was going to cost us, I mean, look at this, for the year is going to cost us $56,000 just in Google Maps bills. So it's like, that's why, like, I'm going into these negotiations with Google Maps going, that number was at over $100,000, and I went and negotiated with them to get it down to 50,000 based off my projected volumes, based off how many times we make each API call. So the more you prepared you are, the better you understand the core mechanics of your product, the more leverage you're going to have in having those negotiations with the vendors. And you'll know where your point is. You're like, I can't do that because then my margin is squeezed too much, or the Google Maps alone is costing 5 times what my servers are going to cost per unit. That's not feasible for me. I recently turned off Amplitude, and we're going to build a custom analytics, because at scale, even at scale, Amplitude is like 0.2 US cents, and my unit cost is like less than 1 unit cent. So 20% of my COGS is going to be analytics, which is just like that'll never make sense. So I either need to squeeze them to half the price, or I need to find another solution. And I've ended up finding another solution. So that's the conversations that I'm having. This is probably at my level. I don't think that's at everyone's level, but just to give you some context, like, you should be able to think about your product in the mechanics of the finances and the costs and what it takes to actually deliver what you need to deliver.
Right. Thank you very much. So I wanted to ask something, but we're already out of time. So I'm going to bring it back.
I'm here in 2 weeks' time.
Yeah, in 2 weeks' time. Thank you very much. Thank you. Anyways, guys, thank you guys for coming in. Thank you for joining us today. So we have other programs. We have the interview prep session on Tuesdays, and interview prep session, on Tuesdays. We have God, I'm trying to remember these programs again. I'm sure you guys are on the Slack.
Every second week. So next week there's interview
calls, right? Checking calls are on Saturdays,
Yeah, technical calls on Saturdays. And then there's the interview prep session, and then the group mentorship session, which happen alternate Tuesdays.
So group mentorship session, we're gonna have Roger back 2 weeks time, which will be on the 30th of July. So I urge you guys to join in. All right. If you have questions, please get them ready. Okay, then disturb me with your questions on that very day. He's good at it. Okay. So
Cool. Just I would love some feedback on these sessions. If you have feedback, either in DM me in the group or in Lumia, please leave a review. We do look at that. I'm always trying to look at like, how can I be more effective at running these sessions? So if you have feedback, what you like, what you don't like, what you want to see more of, please make comments in that. We'll definitely include those feedbacks. I'm always trying to look at getting better too.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. So if you have feedback, you can also reach out. Can you leave your mail so they can send feedback or something?
You can find me at Roger on the PIP group. DM me there or ask a question in the questions channel and just tag me in it. I'm generally pretty responsive.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you guys for coming once again, and have a good evening. Thank you, Roger.
Thank you very much.